You try to get a density analysis of your property with cameras, and then you hired a drone to come in and do it.
Well, yeah, it was earth shattering. I think it's the best tool. There's a group of 4 or 5 does here, and then there's a slight topography change, and there's another 3 or 4 here. Your cameras certainly aren't going to pick that up.
It's criminal for the state of Michigan to not allow people to do these surveys outside of season.
I just haven't done a soil sample, probably because half of me is kind of intimidated by once I get the results, now what?
What are your goals as a deer hunter? I want to increase organic matter. I want to increase soil biology. I want to reduce synthetic inputs. I just want to kill a deer. Right? It varies. There's a spectrum there.
No offense, bro, but you're extremely detailed, bro. You are very detailed. Well, we're excited this morning to have Al from Vitalize Seed Company to chat, and we're just diving into all things seed, all things deer, all things chasing after whitetail and having fun with it. And Al brings a very cool perspective as he's grown Vitalize and what they're doing and all the fun stuff that they're doing. So I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit and the company and all that fun stuff to our listeners.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. My name's Albert, as you mentioned, co-owner of Vitalize Seed with my buddy Jared. What started as a blog, writing some things on soil health that I was passionate about, be it for white-tailed deer or a home garden and orchard, things of that nature, and grew into a business kind of by happenstance, and that's where we are today. I think it's been 5 years now. I myself, I'm an avid gardener. I grow tomato plants from seed every year, plant anywhere from 60 to 120 in my own garden, and then some in mom and dad's.
What do you do with 120 of them? Big salsa guy?
We actually do all the canning ourselves. So we end up canning. I have a big freezer. I freeze them all and then do just one big batch of canning. I think we did 38 quarts of tomato sauce last year. So both my wife's family and her grandparents, as well as mine, were from Italy originally. So the one variety of tomatoes that we grow are actually passed down. They're an heirloom variety from her grandpa. They're like 75 years old. The seeds have just continued to be saved and then replanted and saved and replanted.
Oh, that's really cool.
So it's kind of cool tradition. I've been really into growing things my whole life and have really enjoyed it. We also have a small blueberry patch. It's about 70 plants that we've been managing behind mom and dad's house and just kind of having fun with that. And then, of course, we have the main wildlife and timber farm, which is right at 400 acres in southeastern Ohio that we manage exclusively for future timber value. As well as whitetail deer. And of course, all the benefits of that comes from removing poor quality timber is quail and grouse. And I've been doing that for almost 20 years. I think we're at 16 years or so, and do a lot of food plots and quite a bit of deer hunting. And we really enjoy that as well.
That's really cool. And the reason I was really excited to get you on here is for your vast knowledge around soil health specifically. I think I don't want to say it's underrated. It's becoming definitely more popular in the outdoor industry of, actual soil health. But for me, an example, I am your stereotypical, I want to plant this year and I'm going to put the seed in the ground and I have no idea if it's going to work. So yeah, that's me. And in a nutshell. But it's just it fully comes down to just me being uneducated about it, and that's why we don't have these conversations is to educate. And when you look at soil health, I think what it does not only for a food plot standpoint, but as you learn more about it on the attraction standpoint of actually bringing deer to the nutritional plants is a key component and can really benefit a property.
Yeah. Absolutely. So if you don't mind, I want to hit you with a question that I've been having for a long time because of your understanding of soil health is, we Michigan right now, you can't run minerals, like mineral sites and stuff like that. And so one of the things that I've been kind of toying with and playing with on my own food plots is actually spreading minerals onto food plots. And so using trace minerals like a selenium additive and stuff like that and putting it on the food plots. Could you just talk to that a little bit from like your soil knowledge background and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. So there's a lot of products out there that will talk about that. And one, it starts with a soil test. So there's a famous von Liebig's law, which is the law of the minimum. It was like in the 1800s. He was a scientist. And if you Google it, it shows like an old bucket, right? And on that particular bucket, it talks about if the lowest hole in the bucket is zinc, right, trace mineral or micronutrients, then you're never going to be able to fill that bucket up to maximize the yield. Now we're going to use the term yield here, but attractiveness or overall quality of the food plot, it's all interchangeable. So in order to really understand where you're at and what you should be throwing down, first and foremost, you should start with a soil test.
Yeah.
Because what you have to understand is that if you just, so there's, it's the Mulder's diagram, but essentially what that is it talks about how there's synergistic relationships as well as antagonistic relationships in soil. And that's just a fancy way of saying there's either correlated relationships, right? So they both go upward positively, or there's an inverse. So as, for example, as calcium goes upwards in the soil, then your magnesium is going to go downwards. It's like trying to put two opposite ends of magnets together. It just ain't going to work, right? So think of it that way with the plus and charges and all of the chemistry behind it. So then you get into, okay, well, what if I do need micronutrients? What type of micronutrients should I be adding? And does it make sense to just go get some bagged mineral and put it out there? Why in the hell not, right? Well, that's where it comes into what type of soil do I have? Because you could really add too much salt. Now, salt is a term I want to clarify on, because most people will think of salt as sodium chloride, right? Table salt. But a salt by chemistry definition is a cation and an anion that are attached by a single ionic bond, I believe. I might have misspoke there, but I believe that's the definition in chemistry of what a salt is. So there could be nutrients in salt form that are not necessarily bad for your soil. So I just want to clarify that. It's okay to have a little bit of chloride. It's okay to have a little bit of sodium in your soil, which will show up on a good soil test. It'll give you Na in base saturations. All of that to say, it's not good to have a whole bunch of it, right? You can actually have what's called redox reactions, but essentially chemical reactions within the soil, which are going to make things less available. It can dry your soil out. It can be bad for microbiology. So making sure what micronutrients you're going to put down, number one, they're called micronutrients for a reason. So if you're going to do something like that, like we sell a micronutrient and it has humic to buffer them, and we recommend 25 pounds per acre per planting time. So that doesn't sound like very much, does it? Because again, these are micronutrients. You will get your micronutrient readings in parts per million. When you do a soil test, you don't need pounds and pounds of these things. They can have adverse effects. And the other one is just make sure your salt content is there. If you have a higher soil, you really risk kind of not flushing that soil out and just having it kind of hold there, which again could have some of those negative things. And even I've seen some soils have such high sodium content, not to be confused with just chemistry definition of salt, that we actually had to go in and recommend heavy tillage and even rippers and things like gypsum to help flush that out of the system, because people had either overdone it or naturally due to terrain and how it was draining, it just kind of naturally occurred where there was this sodium buildup. So keep that in mind before blanket applying really anything.
So I think what he said was you can't
do anything. I'm not allowed to do anything without a soil sample. And then, we'll go to the soil sample then. From obviously your education on all of this and understanding is, can you just, obviously you already stressed the importance of a soil sample. Can you give us a flyover of how to read a soil sample for just the average guy?
Yeah. And it's a good question, because what Jay and I were talking before this podcast, I told him I've never done a soil sample. Like I've just more or less, I'm not the full throw and grow guy, but I just haven't done a soil sample, probably because half of me is kind of intimidated by once I get the results, now what? How do I actually even read those results, and how do I know what to decipher and what to do from there?
So great questions. That's one of the things, we bring to the table. We have just added full soil consults for the people who are really like, I want a step-by-step plan. But if you get a soil test and, send it in to us, we'll give you a high level, hey, here's what you should do. But number one, you got to look at, okay,
but is
kind of start
sorry, Al, is that specific to what you like? Do you guys actually need to know what you're going to plan on planting that year, or an overall your soil is lacking this, and before we do anything, this is what we need to do?
Really good question. So it depends. Typically, the way we approach soils, if it's for deer hunters, is we do have a couple questions. Are you tilling or no tilling? Right? What are your goals as a deer hunter? I want to increase organic matter. I want to increase soil biology. I want to reduce synthetic inputs. I just want to kill a deer. Right? It varies. There's a spectrum there. And then what do you plan on planting? So the first step for us is really just getting the foundational chemical structure set on the soil. So when you get that soil test back, preferably, we work with Ward Laboratories. We sell them on our website. You go there, it's like $25. You send them some soil, and when they get the results back, they give us the pH, they give us the macro and micronutrients, and then they give us base saturations, as well as CEC, which is just a fancy way for saying, it means cation exchange capacity. Cation is just a positively charged ion. So calcium is a 2+ charge. Just think of it that way. Hydrogen's a 1+ charge. Why this is important, though, is because when you get your soil test results back, you're going to look at pH. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, I got my pH, great, I'm ready to go. Well, you can get a lot done by simply understanding how does pH relate to the CEC of the soil. So soil type, is it sandy? Is it heavy? Where does it fit? And then lastly, the base saturations of the soil. So like what I would do is I look at pH. Okay, let's say it's a 5.5. Oh man, I need to increase this. I then will jump over and look at the CEC. So let's say it's at 5.5 and it's a sandy soil. And then I'll look at the base saturations and say, okay, I have a light soil and a low pH, and my magnesium is only at 5% and my calcium's at 48% of that soil colloid is kind of what that's giving you a picture of. Well, then I'm going to be very confident saying if I can get dolomite limestone, which is going to be calcium carbonate and magnesium carbonate at a higher ratio versus high cal limestone is only calcium carbonate or primarily calcium carbonate. Well, you will then be able to say, well, I want to get magnesium in there because the structure will be benefited by having more magnesium. So magnesium is a much smaller molecule. So you not only will increase your pH, you'll also increase the magnesium, which is that's like building the foundation of the house, right? When you can get your base saturations in balance with pH relative to the CEC, that puts you in a much stronger position. So literally by having that soil test, you can ensure that you're adding the right type of lime to get everything across the board foundationally in the right direction. Conversely, you could add high calcium lime to some of those situations and actually have a negative impact. You're going to increase the pH because calcium is going to push hydrogen off the soil colloid. Hydrogen is what makes soil acidic. And the carbonate element of the lime, calcium carbonate, is going to interact with that hydrogen in a free flow water solution when you get rain, right? You're going to end up getting H2O, you're going to get CO2 output. So it's pretty straightforward really how lime works. But if you just put in calcium and it's a light soil, you can actually make the soil, believe it or not, too porous and reduce nutrient holding capacity because of that. And that's where understanding what type of lime can really be beneficial. I'll give you another example just to help clear this up a little bit. Let's say you have a really heavy soil. I see this a lot. People are like, oh my gosh, I have compaction, but look, I have good organic matter. My pH is 6.5. It's perfect, but I'm still dealing with compaction. What's the problem? And I'll look and I'll go, your magnesium's at like 25% of the soil, on the base saturation reading. I'll say, did you guys put down like a whole bunch of dolomite lime to get the pH up? Yeah. Oh man, we got this great deal on lime. We put it all down there. I'm like, yeah, you're going to have to put some gypsum down because we need to drive calcium up to help the structure of that chemical structure of the soil. We're going to drive magnesium down a little bit. You're going to add porosity to the chemical side of that foundation, the chemical side of that soil, and that will then allow biology to take over. So kind of a long-winded way of saying, with a good soil test and somebody to help you interpret it that first year or two, just look at pH and then decide based on your calcium and magnesium, what is the best soil or best lime, for that soil type.
And again, is that specific to a product, or that's just balancing your soil as a whole?
So that's just balancing your soil as a whole. Now, if you wanted to then get into the point of like, so that's where we start. If you're then going to say, okay, we want, again, it's food plotter, row crop farmer, some of that depends. But if you're like, hey, man, and we've worked with people who do this. They're like, I want 200 bushel corn, and you can mathematically calculate what is it going to take to get there, right? There's a bunch of data out there. You need so much phosphorus available in the soil. But really what it comes down to is timing of application relative to the soil type. So a lot of times, like row crop farmers are probably going to have their pH and base saturations because it's probably not the first year it's being farmed. Like it's probably pretty dialed, right? So then it comes down to type of nutrients, how are they being applied, where are they being applied, timing of application throughout the growth cycle. And similarly, you can get into some of that nuance in food plots, but normally you don't have to go as far down the line unless somebody's very specific about wanting to grow monoculture.
So your lime commentary, where does some of these liquid limes and some of the pelletized lime, understanding how those are individually going to affect this differently, how do those come into play, and how do you choose those?
So in general, this is not absolute, but just for talking purposes, in order for lime to truly work, you have to have a carbonate element, because the calcium or magnesium in the case of dolomite is almost like a catalyst for pushing hydrogen into the soil solution, let's say, and that carbonate has to react in order to make H2O and CO2. And basically what we have to do, we need that carrier to get the hydrogen away. If you don't have hydrogen out of there, it just sits around and gets right back onto the soil colloid, and that's your acidity molecule. So we have to get that away, which is what the carbonate side of calcium carbonate does. So there are lime solutions that are, or liquid limes, I should say, that are really finely screened calcium carbonate. They can jam up sprayers and stuff. I think it's a good Band-Aid because it's very fast reaction. Mathematically, the volume is not enough to change pH over time. And I don't think anybody would argue that. You're simply putting down, 1 to 2 pounds of active ingredient, let's say on an acre. But it's very fine. So it can help to maybe change, in the rhizosphere, in the root zone, the pH for a short period of time. So I don't think it's a terrible thing. If you have to go across the field with your sprayer anyways, and you can get it to be compatible, say you're doing an herbicide burn down or something, I don't think it hurts if your pH has to come up. But it's more of a Band-Aid situation for maybe the first year or two. And then as far as ag lime versus pellet lime, either one, right? So ag lime tends to last a little bit longer. You can get more volume out typically if you can bring in an ag buggy. Every situation's different. My property is located in southeastern Ohio. There's not, if any, that I can think of, ag buggies even around to spread ag lime. Due to the terrain and just the lack of agriculture in the area, it's just not a big, popular thing. So we have always went with pelletized lime. Yeah. So you can calculate out specifics, how many pounds and stuff. But in my experience, again, I've had really good success with the pelletized lime, and you don't have to do it all in 1 year. That's like the biggest thing. So if you get a soil test, you go, oh my gosh, I need 2 tons per acre, to really get this from a 5 to 6.5. I'm like, okay, well, this year, the budget, I'm going to get 700 pounds down. And next year, the budget's going to be 800 pounds, and you can do it over multiple years and things are still going to grow, specifically in the food plot world. If you're in farming and you're trying to pay your mortgage, it's a little bit more stressful and we got to move a little bit quicker and maybe incorporate it and stuff. But if you're in a no-till system in a food plot world, I always tell people, some's better than nothing. And get it down as to what you can and just work towards it. And that's why continuous soil tests will make sure that you don't overdo it, right? You shouldn't blindly apply, because there are soils where I've worked with a lot of people with lawns. I've pulled soil tests on lawns and people are like, I got some lime in the garage. I was going to put it out there. I'm like, hold the phone here. I just got your results back. Your pH is 7.5. Why are we putting lime down? Right. And it's like, oh, well, I don't know. Somebody told me that was good. I said, no, we don't need any lime here. We don't want to push that even more alkaline, right? We want to keep it, actually would like to bring it down ideally if we could. So again, that's where that soil testing comes back into play, and then trying to address. But most people, I'll say, do pelletized lime in my experience, unless they're one of the larger farmers that we work with.
As far as the liquids, any fertilizer goes, would you say all liquid fertilizer in any form is more of a quick Band-Aid than it is like long-term health for the soil?
Are you jumping into fertilizer or just the lime? I think there's a big difference, but
Albert
can speak to that.
Yeah,
but
and that's, again, to my lack of knowledge. But like, we jumped on the liquid side, so like I had to ask. It's like there's a lot of liquid products out there now. You can basically get a liquid for anything. So like, to me, I started using it last year, and I just found it way more convenient because to your point, you can mix it with a burn down or whatever. So it's like across the board. Is it, let's say again, is liquid more quick term on all those levels, or mainly just to your point, the lime?
No, I mean, I think, I don't want to talk in absolutes, but I would say that regardless of what you're putting down, if it's in a liquid form, I mean, at some point, it's just a matter of volume, right? Like, if you're putting down fertilizer, at 80 pounds or 300 pounds, depending on the fertilizer type per acre, and you're putting down a foliar application of a NPK, and you're putting it at, whatever it comes out to be weight-wise, half a pound per acre, there's just a difference there, right? Yeah. With the caveat being that I think where most people, like, we have 3 different liquid products and they work phenomenally, but they really work as like a catalyst to the entire system as a whole, right? Mm. So you're applying, we have a product we call Regen N. It's an amino acid based nitrogen, which is proven to reduce stress in the plant. Plants can assimilate it better. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like how plants form plant protein, but essentially they're chains of, amino acids, peptides, enzymes that ultimately end up forming a plant protein. So the easiest way to think about this is when you apply like our Regen N or fish fertilizer based foliar products, those have a bunch of amino acids in them. So when the plant assimilates those nutrients right on the leaf surface, what it ends up doing is it reduces stress, because it's like starting a marathon halfway through for the plant. It's not taking a synthetic nitrate and having to then convert it all the way to a plant protein. It's already taking it into amino acid form, and now it only has to go this much further to convert it into plant protein. So on those cases, you can get a really good response with short applications, and they're great products, but there's no silver bullets in soil health, and you're not going to, I don't think, again, I don't want to talk about absolutes, but you're not going to liquid apply enough nutrients to make some massive altering in what reads on a soil test. Mm-hmm. You might see really good plant response and apply them on the foliar, or apply them right at the time of planting as a ground soak, and those can do things to stimulate biology. We have a product that we recommend mixing with herbicides to help with the burn down, specifically for those who have heavy residue. And it's going to stimulate biology to cycle that residue, which then can result in a great growth response, because as biology is cycling, say, corn stalks, those nutrients have to go somewhere. Well, they're going to go somewhere. And if there's a fresh crop coming right after that, well, they're going to take those nutrients up, right? So I think with foliars, it's more about understanding the timing and giving the plants what they need. And then again, not to keep going back to soil tests, but there are a lot of times you can read research where one farmer will use one product and half a mile down the road, the other farmer will use the same product and have two very, within similar soil types and all this, but they have two very different reactions or responses to those products. And a lot of times, a more degraded soil, the plants will respond greater to almost any input, be it biological, be it a foliar application, be it a synthetic fertilizer application, because they're starting at such a lower baseline that any addition to help that particular plant in a degraded soil system is going to have this really good response. And people see that a lot. An example is some of the liquid limes to kind of bring this full circle. Yeah. There are products out there that are calcium chloride. They're not altering pH, at least not for any duration. But people go, well, I sprayed that daggum field and man, everything greened up. Well, if you look at soil tests, and I look at quite a few of them, most of the time calcium is deficient. There's not enough calcium from a structural perspective. So I personally believe, and I don't have any quantifiable data to prove this, you're seeing this great response, so many claim, simply from the calcium. It has nothing to do with the pH altering or anything like that. You're just supplying something that quite a few soils are low on. So all of a sudden, of course, those plants are going to be like, wow, that was great. They took it into their roots, they translocated it, and now they're able to do what they need to do. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind is you might have a really good response to something, and somebody down the road could try the same exact, liquid product that you use specifically in the lime sense and maybe not feel the same. So not sure if that answered your question, but hopefully it came close.
I think it really does, because I think what ultimately comes down to is most hunters that I interact with and people that I know come from the McDonald's mentality is I want it my way and I want it now. And I'm limited on my time and my knowledge to get a food plot in. And
they just want to see something green growing.
Yeah. Most guys that I've seen, like if they love their rye plot because it's green and it worked. And so they're super excited and from a fact that they just don't know what they don't know. Like we're learning an absolute ton right now. Right. And it's like, I don't know what I don't know. And so it's like, oh, I didn't even know I could do this. And now this plant is going to be exponentially better and more palatable, have higher sugar contents, all of the things that I want, and actually be exponentially more attractive to the deer, because I just didn't know.
And I think what I'm starting to learn more on, and what I think the hunting community as a whole is starting to learn more on, is actually a healthy plant has more drawing power to a white-tailed deer than just, like you said, you can, let's say you plant some brassicas. I think brassicas are probably like what I see a lot of people saying like, oh, it works for me. Oh, it doesn't work for me. The deer don't eat it here, but they eat it here. It's because of the soil health, saying that soil's not fueling that brassica to make it nutrition and palatable and delicious to the deer. Where this person over here is planting the brassicas and their soil health is better for a brassica, and that's why the deer are responding to it differently.
Absolutely. I also think with brassicas, a lot of times people plant them in monocultures, and we sell a brassica mix because so many people were like, can we just get just the brassicas? And I think that, I had the opportunity to interview an animal scientist from Ward Laboratories, and she's just brilliant, and one of the big things that we kept going back to, whether it be cattle or deer or really any ruminant, is the kind of, I want to pick the right word, not battle, but like this kind of constant dance that they do with balancing the rumen, and they're super good at it. Like they don't need somebody to tell them like eat this or eat that. But if they go into a brassica field, one time and the soil isn't prepped properly, or they're bitter, they were planted too early, they planted too late, whatever the situation is, right? And the deer get a taste of it, they don't have like a real good reason to stay in that field, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's just a brassica monoculture. Whereas like if you have brassicas like in our fall mix where they're mixed in with grains and clovers and things like that, you almost always start to see deer spending more time because quite frankly, well, if they don't like the one bite of brassica, let's just say that the soil in that particular spot wasn't, there's all these other things that they're going to enjoy, right? And then they're going to go over and pick some pokeberry out because they're going to balance that rumen out, and they need some higher lignin filled, fiber things. And then they need also more green, and that they know how to do that, right? They're their own chemists. They understand it all better than probably we do. And even some people who study the rumen of those animals. But I do think a lot of that stems from soil health. And something I would say where foliars are critical, and going back to your point, is again, if you have that soil test, and I have a really good friend and mentor of mine who consults on about 20 to 30,000 acres in the Southeast and for row crop farmers, and one of the things that I was amazed is they would grow corn that would rival the Midwest. I'm like, how are you doing that? Because I know his soils are like Daytona Beach sand, and everything tells us you shouldn't really be able to do that, right? Because there's no nutrient holding capacity there. But yet here they are. And what was really interesting is their use of well-timed applications, like mentioned, in furrow at planting, which I understand isn't going to relate to every food plotter. But I do think there's something important here is understanding the foliar applications and timing of those. So in that particular case, for the first several years of farming a new piece of ground that has super low holding capacity, they have to build up organic matter and or add it through various methods, chicken manure, things like that. They use a ton of either pivot systems or foliar sprays on the tractor to feed the plant during those times of need, right? So they're physically giving, almost like force feeding that plant or spoon feeding that plant. And sometimes you'll see that with like around the base, depending on the nutrients, like in nitrogen, you can put it down in a Y drop. It's called, you sometimes might see videos of YouTube where they're putting it down in between the rows of corn and it's going right down. And then if you can water it in or rain's coming, that nitrogen goes down and gives that corn a nice boost. But again, that all goes back to really understanding your soil and how those applications can fit in, and then making sure you have the healthiest plot possible. That's really where it starts. But in the beginning, like in brassicas and stuff, if you did a soil test and you're like, man, I got a really light soil, having some of those diverse foliar sprays can kind of force some of those plant nutrients right into it, right? You're kind of spoon feeding that plant directly that way. And that's where I really love foliar applications. I think they fit in really nicely there. And just make sure you know what you're getting. Because they, like you said, Lee, there's a lot on the market now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of feel like you're touching on like the whole, there's a ton of tools out there, and I don't think we fully are educated enough on what tools to use when, and like you're saying, like these guys are proven that the foliar application at the right time makes a ton of sense for them to inject that to those plants so they can survive and thrive actually in that space. I have an obscure question, a personal question on a farm that I have down in Kentucky that kind of threw me into a weird space with actually growing brassicas. Was a gentleman expressed to me that and I can't figure this out. I don't have my soil sample for that property in front of me. Otherwise, I'd pick it apart with you. But he talked about tobacco planting and the adverse effects of years of tobacco planting causing something in the soil to be there. I was just curious if you had heard of any of that kind of stuff or in the South.
Not specific to tobacco. I will say that there are plants that have allelopathy, which is just a fancy way of saying like it's a defense mechanism to prevent competition. So like black walnuts are a good example. You might walk around under a black walnut tree and you go, man, everything's just about dead under here. I think it gets a little bit overpresented. I don't know if it's not like a residual herbicide. I think sometimes it gets overpresented. Now, what I have seen, it goes back to Lee's point with the brassicas. People, man, the first few years I planted brassicas, sometimes they'll say the deer demolished them, and now they don't, or now I can't grow them like I used to. And sometimes it's the inverse of that, right? They'll say I planted them for 3 years, they never touch them, and then they start hammering them. Well, it was a learned behavior in that case. But if you look at the first case, the situation that you're saying, depending on how and you see this a lot in pasture ground. So I see it all the time. People go, well, it's got to be pretty good soil. They had cows here for 50 years. I'm like, no, that actually probably means that all the good nutrients are at the market. right? Because they weren't doing anything to replenish the nutrients in that soil. They weren't overseeding it with clovers or overseeding with deep-rooted perennial like an alfalfa or going in there and drilling annual cover crops. They just had it be orchard grass and whatever wild clover grew in there, and they had the cows come eat, and then the cows went off to the sale barn, and they did that for 50 years, right? And they supplemental fed the cows to put on the weight that they needed to, and they did that for years. And that's not a knock. I mean, that's just
the truth.
Fact of the matter.
Yeah.
So when you look at a tobacco field, yeah, there's a high probability that if it was farmed in tobacco for, say, 50 years, and there was never cover cropping, and they were looking at the, which they should, they were balancing their checkbook. Hey, what kind of tobacco can we grow with what type of inputs and what's going to be our outputs, right? Well, we can minimize inputs. We're still going to be pretty good on tobacco production. Okay, let's do it. And you do that over and over and over again. It's called mining your soil, just like mining coal or anything else. It's going to take a while for that coal to be backfilled, right? So that's more times than not saying that's specific, I'd have to look, but more times than not, that's what I see in degraded soil systems, is that it's just, we've taken, and, we haven't put back. And to that point, I have seen it with deer too, because that's why I'm such a big proponent. You were saying, guys want to just have a quick plot, shoot a deer and be done with it, which that's fine. But if you do want to take it the next step further, doing the soil test and putting up an exclusion fence so you can measure browse on your field, right? Just a 3-foot circle, 14 gauge wire, put a T-post and see, okay, was it a soil fertility issue or was it an over browse issue? Will tell you a ton. And I've had fields where I'm dealing with issues because for all the years we've owned the property, we've increased food, we've shot does, but I'm still losing 12 to 3 foot of tonnage on every field. Well, it's going into the deer's room and the deer's walking off, and eventually those nutrients, you got to do something to try to either cycle them more or get them back into the system, and foliars can help. But I do think eventually too, that's where you get into some of, like, we have some natural products like our no-till nurture, putting even a little bit down to replenish can go a long way. So based on that soil test, I would say that we probably could dig in more to it, but that would be some of my general guesses as to kind of what's going on there.
The exclusion cage, I did one for the first time this year too. It's a very, very small plot, but I was like, man, like, is this plot not just getting enough sunlight? Again, I've never done a soil test on it. But I'm like, the first year was great. And all of a sudden now I'm looking at like this clover and chicory plot is just like, it's nothing. So I put an exclusion cage in it. I was like, oh, it's just too small. There's just too many deer here. They're just crushing it because everything else around it, like in the exclusion cage, I mean, it was like 7 inches tall and everything else was just mowed down. Yeah. It was, I think one it's such a simple thing that you can do to a food plot to your point, again, measure, is it soil health? It won't give you a direct answer without doing without doing a soil test, but it gives you a really quick.
Well, when you're talking about herd balance and all that kind of stuff and your browse pressure and trying to figure out, do I have enough browse species to greens on my property, and really what it, like, Dr. Deere was talking about, like, is it well balanced all the way around the horn, or do we just we've just now become a deer magnet because we suck all the deer in from the neighbors because we have everything that we need, but now we have a problem because we have far too many deer on our property. And so now we have to increase our food plot, our food production, and our browse production, and to what rate. And so that's like, it's crucial to have like an actual herd analysis. However you get that done, we would propose that you use a drone in the areas that's allowed, and because it's really, really accurate. But then at the same time, the accuracy of trail cameras is important, and then visual observation at the same time of like looking at your deer herd and really, making the right adjustments based on that information.
Yeah. When sticking, because I know, Al, you actually did a thermal drone analysis on your property, which we'll get into later, but was sticking with the food plot side and your soil health. Is it, if somebody wanted to actually look at their soil health and think long-term, instead of just saying each year I want to apply this much fertilizer or lime or whatever to it each year, long term, is it better to grow your soil health with, I want to say the natural way, or with other plants rather than applying all this potential of whatever it is in the fertilizer in it?
Well, I think what's important is having clear goals, right? But then also understanding what you're applying and how it works. So I'll give you a quick example of this. Like, I'm not anti-fertilizer. I haven't applied fertilizer to many of my fields in many years, but our Nitro Boost, which is our spring summer plant, I mean, I'm getting 14, 15 foot tall sorghum Sudan grass. I mean, that plant species alone, forget the beans and the peas and the sunflowers and everything else that's in that mix, right? That mix alone, the biomass creation is outrageous. I've done 3x3 tissue cover crop. It's called a cover crop tissue analysis. So you send it there, and I don't do it from a nutrient perspective for the deer. So just to be clear, this is specifically for what are these nutrients from a soil nutrient perspective, because you can take nitrogen, they multiply by 6.25, and that gives you plant protein. It's kind of like a rough guess, but nonetheless, sometimes people will do like blanket tissue samples and go, look, our clover field has 9,000 grams of protein. It's like, well, hold on a second. You got stems in there. You have other things that might not be ate. So just for clarity purposes. But if I recall, I had like 80 pounds of, and this is just in the tissue, right? So this is just from half inch above. So not in the root system or anything, not in the organic matter. I had something like 80 units of nitrogen that was going to be available. Now that's in an organic form because it's in the plant. So it's got to get broken down. And then I had around, I think it was 25 pounds of phosphorus, which is pretty significant. And then I think it was 30 or 40 pounds of potassium. So what's interesting about that is in those particular soil tests, and I had even taken a couple right out of the probe, the nutrients that were actually available for a soil test. So I'm over here telling you how important these soil tests are. They were far below that, which goes to show you how important different root structures are, right? Because some of those roots might be 14, 18 inches deep, and I'm sitting there taking a 6-inch probe. So you got to keep that, into perspective. So I will say that number one, yes, you can achieve a ton with just plants. Okay. The second item is understanding what you're doing. Let's say you're like, I'm just not happy. I feel like my soil is so degraded. I need some fertility to get where I need to be, and then I can kind of wean off. And we see this a lot. The problem is understanding how nutrients move. So if you go put triple 13 down on a legume crop, depending on your soil type, well, the nitrogen's probably not going to really be needed. You're probably going to promote grass and or it's going to get volatilized, depending on when you get rain. The phosphorus is not going to move in a no-till environment. I mean, this is so well documented through academia, through farmer anecdotal observations. Phosphorus does not move. I mean, maybe a quarter inch a year. So you're not going to get movement out of that. And your potassium is kind of one of those products that can move or doesn't, depending on the soil type. So in really light soils, you might see some movement there in time. But what ends up happening is people are chasing these numbers and they're like, I'm putting down 200 pounds of triple 13 every year, and they're struggling. They're not seeing that they're committed to, say, a no-till environment. And all of that P and K that they put down, hundreds of dollars, is sitting on the first top 2 inches of soil. So we see that a lot. And there's a lot of farmers that have done testing on this. I've done a little bit of testing. That's called nutrient stratification. So if you're interested in how do I maximize what I'm doing and get the most out of my soils, and if I do want to apply the right nutrients, you got to ask yourself, well, are you tillage or no-till? Because that changes a lot, right? If you're committed to no-till, like myself, I'm committed to no-till on my farm. Well, in that particular case, then I have to make sure I'm using like our no-till nurture. Why is that so great? Well, because it's like manure, but it's easily spread. So it's in a pelletized form. It took years to find this and make our own mix. But why that's important is biology, worms, they're going to move those nutrients through the soil profile because they're going to consume them, because they're like in manure, natural, organic forms, right? Worms don't eat rock. You throw phosphorus down, the mine phosphorus that sets on top and doesn't move. That's why it just sits there, right? So I'll give you one quick story. There was a famous no-till grower. Now, he didn't use cover crop, so this hurt the situation. He was out of Illinois, been no-tilling since I think the late 70s. So he had always done what traditionally everyone in the area did, which is very typical in farming communities. Whoever is kind of what everyone has always done, they just kind of follow that, right? So after he took his corn off that year, the co-op came out and he said, yeah, put down, whatever rate of P&K, broadcast it down over the top of the corn stalks. He did that every year for 15 years. And he just was kind of seeing some yield. I don't want to say drag, but maybe a plateau. He's just like, I'm just not getting to this next step, whatever that might be. And I'm paraphrasing. It's been a couple of years since I reviewed this. Long story long, he takes a soil probe and he cuts it into inch segments, sends it off to a lab. And at 15 years, it was something like 60 or 80% of that P&K he had applied was still in the top 2 inches of that soil test. So he was like, holy smokes. So what did he do? He actually flipped that ground over with a moldboard plow, refit it, and then went right back into a no-till system. And he saw a huge spike in nutrients, in yield, because those nutrients were now where the roots could get to them. And now this is a professional farmer with, big equipment and can put things in furrow and 2x2 and down pressure. Most of us don't have that. So what can we do? Just make sure that we're picking the nutrients in the right form and let biology do the rest of the work, right? Let the cover crops move them, let the worms move them, let the fungi and microbes move them. And then you're in a situation where it naturally moves through the soil. Does that make sense as to kind of how you would go about?
Yeah. So could you, for our listeners and for myself, as you've decided to move and you stated that you do a no-till, can you just give us a walkthrough of your no-till process? Like what you do annually?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of changes by field, but
sure.
So I bought a no-till drill a few years ago, but I do a lot of fields without it. So just let's go with the broadcast feeder or broadcast spinner or whatever you're using then on the no-till to start. Yeah. So, I mean, basically I go into a field. Let's say I planted it in our carbon load in the fall, because I guess I got to start somewhere. So let's say I planted in the carbon load in the fall. Now we're coming into spring. I get to the field. I cut the tractor off. I walk the field. I go, okay, this field's 90% carbon load. Looks great. In those cases, I drill or broadcast into it and then either do the roll. I bought a homemade roller crimper. So I played around with that just because I wanted to kind of test to see, what all the hype is about. Or we use an herbicide and we burn down the existing planting and pray for rain. If we have time to run a cultipacker or like I said, the roller crimper over it, we will. But that's really it. I mean, pretty straightforward. If the field is really weedy, then that's when we use, we'll use an herbicide, like just a glyphosate or something like that, just to kind of clean it up. But really straightforward. I will say when you broadcast, I do increase seed rate slightly. Another thing that you'll learn, like Lee was hitting with on the exclusion fence, every seed company out there, right, is going to tell you generalized seeding rates.
Yeah.
But depending on your deer density, proximity to bedding, all of those other, how much food's on the farm, what is your soil fertility, right? Like maybe you're just rocking and rolling. You've put down a bunch of stuff on that field. It's ready to go. Maybe you can get away with a little bit higher density because of those other factors. So that is one thing I'll say is with broadcasting. And then based on, we have a pretty high deer density. We'll get into some of the numbers later. That might change my rate of broadcasting, right? I might know, hey, I'm going to go a little bit heavier.
But is that plant specific though? Because I know some, like, again, let's go back to brassicas. You can overseed a brassica. So like, are you taking that's got to be a factor in this decision too, right?
Yeah. So I'm more so talking, absolutely it is. I'm more so talking with our mixes. So, highly diverse. But to your point, which is a good one, Lee, is like in the spring, summer, I'll tell guys, you could probably drill that mix, and even at drilling, right, which is super high rate of success, because you reduce your predation on the seed, you could probably drill at 90 pounds to the acre and still have a pretty darn good plot. You're not going to see a bunch of plants struggling. In the fall, because there is a good bit of brassica in there, I tell guys, I go, if you're going to increase it, do it, but do it slow. Like the first year, maybe do like a 20% add-on, which is, 9 pounds extra per acre. Don't go, oh, I'm going to put down, 70 pounds of the carbon load, because there is a lot of brassicas in there. I just think you're going to probably overdo it and waste seed. So I tell people a lot of times, I'm like, seed, you can store it in your house or in your garage. It's best if it's not frozen super hot. But if you buy 2 acres and you put 1.5 acres down and you go back a month later, and you're like, yeah, it looks really good. It's filled in nice, then just save that other part of the seed, tape it shut, keep it in a cool, dry place, and use it next year to fill your gaps. Well, if you have to use it, you use a little bit. I think that's the best, so that 1, you're cognizant of the spend. Everybody has a budget, right? And 2, just making sure that you're not overcrowding those plants, specifically in the fall.
So back to your process. You're just broadcasting those, taking that down. Are then you doing any fall plantings, depending on that?
Yeah.
fall?
Yeah. So our main system, and I do this on about 90% of our field. So I plant our spring Nitro Boost, which is like 13 or 14 species. And it's called Nitro Boost because it has a lot of legumes. So legumes fix atmospheric nitrogen. So I plant that in the spring and the summer. There are some plants in there specifically which deer shouldn't be eating. Young sorghum, Sudan, things like that. And that's really just to have a thatch for the fall, right? So as I mentioned, I'll have 14 foot, 15 foot, 12 foot, areas where I'm going through it. It's just beans are climbing up the sorghum Sudan. That's the other thing I like about it, is it gives you some structure, and it's just kind of a jungle. And I'm laying that all down. And I then put our carbon load into it. I actually normally put the carbon load in first and then lay it over just to kind of act as a cover. And our carbon load is 17 species, all annual clovers, peas, 3 different types of grains, or 4 different types of grains. It's only about 55% grain. So that's one thing we pride ourselves on. Yeah. And then it's about 4.5 pounds of brassicas per acre. So we really pride ourselves on that, because 10% of the mix is high quality brassicas, not just purple top turnip or radish, which we have that in there too, because who doesn't like those, to see a tuber. But we also have forage quality brassicas. The reason we pick those is because, they've been designed to be able to handle browse. So you guys probably remember, several years ago, and they're still great. We actually use some in our mix. Eagle soybeans came out, and they were like the biggest rage, because when they would get nipped, they would produce another leaf. Yeah. And there's other Tyrone forage soybeans. There's a couple other ones out there. And we use some in our spring summer mix for that reason, because they get nipped and they'll try, depending on deer density, to keep producing, which keeps more tonnage. Yeah. So with our fall mix, we use some of those forage quality brassicas as well for that very reason, so they can handle a little bit more pressure as everything gets established. So the whole idea is you're fixing all this nitrogen both above and below ground, right, with your legumes, and then you're planting your fall mix into this and using that biology. And the reason we call it Nitro Boost and carbon load is kind of a play on carbon to nitrogen ratios. If you've ever done any composting or anything like that, a carbon and nitrogen ratio is really what determines.
You don't compost. Sorry.
I pooped in the woods before.
You pooped that's composting to you? Jeez, Albert, he just has he goes, I pooped in the woods before. Sorry.
But that's close. The best example I have for that I use a lot is if you to help people visualize carbon and nitrogen ratios, there's 2 examples I use. One is if you rake the leaves in your yard and just put them in the corner of your yard and just a big pile of leaves and sticks, you could visualize like that's probably going to be there for a while. Mm-hmm. But if all of a sudden your wife goes, hey, I got some coffee grounds. Hey, why don't you throw the grass clippings on that pile? Well, hey, I have some orange slices. I got some banana peels, lower carbon to nitrogen items, right? Specifically, the carbon and nitrogen that makes up that particular product, the lower that number, the faster it decomposes. So the easiest way to think about it is if you did that, and then let's say you're like, hey, I'm going to turn this over a little bit with a pitchfork. You can visualize what would happen.
You can't keep derailing. He keeps derailing you with poop comments. I don't understand what's wrong with this guy.
It's okay.
Just try to be as natural as possible.
If you did that, you could visualize what would happen. And what would happen is you'd end up having soil. Another example I give to people, if that one doesn't hit home, is if you had a clover monoculture and you're like, I want to plant brassicas. And you went in there and sprayed that clover monoculture. Again, clover's low carbon and nitrogen, very green plant, not real lignin filled. Those are just some kind of general things you could think of to what determines carbon and nitrogen. But if you sprayed that field and went back 2 weeks later, you pretty much expect to see dirt, right? I mean, I think anybody who's ever done that, whereas like if I said, okay, well, what if you had a cornfield and you said, hey, we're going to spray this off and come back in 2 weeks, what would you expect to see? See a hell of a lot of corn stalks, right? I mean, you're not expecting it to be dirt. Well, that's because it's higher carbon and nitrogen ratio. It's going to take more time, more biology to break that down and cycle those nutrients. So going back to our system, that's really what it's based on. You're planting that nitro boost and carbon load and nitro boost and carbon load to just keep those nutrients cycling from one planting to the next and kind of jump-starting your biology, reducing your need for synthetic inputs. Again, and then we put all the other pieces in there, like monitoring browse, adjusting your seed density that's going to fit the grower's goals and things like that. But that's really what we typically do on our farm. I have a couple areas where I do we have some clover blends and stuff. I just can't really get the tractor in there.
Sure.
Very similarly, I plant the clover. I let the deer pretty much do the mowing. If need be, I can spray a clethodim or a grass select herbicide. And then I will oftentimes broadcast our carbon load into those clover patches just to get them a little bit more diversity growing up too, and help grab some of that extra. One of the things with clover, a lot of times is guys will go, man, I had clover. It was great for 3 years or 4 years, and then got taken over by grass. And a lot of times that ends up happening not only because the grass is there, but also just this excessive nitrogen, and there's nothing scavenging that nitrogen in the profile. So by adding, the carbon load over the top, having the grains, having some of the brassicas, even if they don't ever grow to be record size, some of those roots are going to go down and they're going to grab some of that excess nitrogen and stuff, which can help, in my experience, reducing some of that grass pressure over time. Awesome. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah. So do you run that same system then through a tilling option in that as well? Or just a no-till? With tilling. Yeah, with tillage.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a bunch of growers who till. The biggest thing with tilling is there's nothing wrong with tillage. It works. The problem is for how long, right? So anybody who's no-till's the only way is probably somewhat short-sighted. So what I tell people is, one, look up conservation tillage. You don't have to bury your tiller. That's number one. Number two is when you till, you are adding air to the soil. You absolutely, there's no debating it. You are going to burn up organic matter. There's no way around it. So the only way to keep that going is to increase inputs of some sort, right? So if you're going to till, you're going to see great response. But really, when you till in, say you till in our Nitro Boost, that's really going to be a shorter term food source because you're tilling it in. It's like putting air to a fire. It's like if you took a blower and put it to a fire, what's going to happen? Oh, the fire's going to race up. Well, if you don't put more wood on that fire, right, where's the energy going to come from? It's going to burn out. It's kind of the same idea with tillage. It's not wrong. You break up aggregation. You can hurt some fungi, but there's people who are purely organic and they're never going to use an herbicide, so they'd rather use tillage. So I always tell people we can, and we do it all the time. We talk to growers from all over the country and we meet them where they're at. So like, if you want to do tillage, that's what you got. That's what you're comfortable with. You don't want to use an herbicide. That's okay. But let's just monitor what's happening in that soil over time, because when you add all those microbes, they're going to look for a carbon source. Once the carbon source is gone, being the previous planting, being what was there, what's the next best carbon source? Well, that's going to be your organic matter. And it just there's no arguing that. I mean, it's It's proven. So that's the one negative is you are going to probably increase what's called your liable fraction of organic matter, which will get cycled quicker. You can break up soil aggregation. You can hurt fungal communities, some stuff like that. But if that's your only tool, and it works well for you and you're happy with it, that's okay. We just have to balance the nutrient side of it. Are we going to put in some no-till nurture? Are we going to put in a different, fertilizer that the person likes and work that in when you're doing the tillage, and then just maybe reduce the tillage depth a little bit, and that can kind of be the best of both worlds. But we certainly have people do that. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love it. So.
When, for your crimper, you said you built or got a crimper. How did you like those results? Because what I'm imagining is, let's picture, is it your carbon load that gets really, really, really tall that you were talking about?
The Nitro Boost.
The Nitro Boost. Okay, yeah. So the Nitro Boost. Now let's picture you got your Nitro Boost going in the spring or in the summer, and you're ready for your fall plot. So let's say you're just broadcasting seed through that. You go over that and you crimp it. I'm just imagining such a thick blanket of crops laying on top of that. Are you still seeing like good responses from that? Because I'm just picturing like this gigantic blanket over the seed where it's not actually getting sunlight and growing.
So it's funny. When I first invited a buddy out to my place, he kind of said the same thing. He goes, I don't know, man, this is a lot of sorghum stalks. And I go, well, just trust me. Mm-hmm. So if you understand carbon and nitrogen ratios, like we just talked about, it's going to cycle itself, right? And that is where sometimes people can mess up, but that's another discussion for another day. So what ends up happening is your biology does the work, and it'll cycle those nutrients. So he came back the following March. We were shed hunting, and he picked up a couple of it. He's like, there's no sorghum stalks left. And the ones that were there, he picked them up, and he's like, look, and it just like falls apart. It's real brittle. And you can see the rye and the clovers coming up and everything from the carbon load. And he's like, that's unbelievable. I'm like, yeah, that fed the carbon load all fall and winter long. It broke down. So if you was a monoculture of sorghum or something like that, it could be more problematic. The key there again is that balance of carbon and nitrogen ratio plants, and then of course the following planting, making sure that that's balanced relative to the previous planting. And we do that all for you, right? So number one, you don't have to really worry about thatch cycling like you would if you were just planting, like say a monoculture of sorghum, or where I see it a lot is guys go crazy with rye. So guys will do 300 pounds to the acre of rye grain, and then the next spring they'll let it all go to head, and it'll be really mature. And then they're like, well, I'm just going to no-till into it, and they'll put even like a legume like soybeans down. And what ends up happening, they're like, gosh, I don't know if it's the deer or what happened, but I'm not happy with this growth. Well, what happens is you get what's called nutrient tie-up. You just have it's like that leaf pile. There's too much carbon to be cycled without nitrogen input. So there are times where you can read in, whether it's academia or agronomy type texts, farm journals, things like that, where it talks about applying fall nitrogen applications in farming context. And normally that's directly related to breaking down those higher carbon and nitrogen plants. So if a farmer's like, man, I've been no-tilling corn for so many years, I don't want to go back to tillage, but I got all this corn stalks, and they don't want to use cover crops for whatever reason, right? They feel the timing is wrong. But what they end up doing is applying fall nitrogen to feed the microbes so they have more nitrogen so they can absorb more carbon and cycle that. So your first part is no, it's not necessarily an issue unless, of course, those things aren't balanced. So, for anybody doing this, if you're trying to do it on your own, just keep that in mind, you know. As far as the crimper goes, one of the reasons I got a crimper is because I wanted to test it, because there's a lot of stuff out there like, the crimper's the new best thing. And I will say it's cool. It's very cool. And there's some USDA studies.
You did not sell me on the crimper.
It's cool. I like the fact that you could say a crimper is cool, bro. I'm sorry. Like, I just met you, but can I really say that that's that cool of a thing?
I think it's cool.
Okay. I don't know.
It's that's about all it is. No, I think it fits a nice niche in the market. You know, if you're somebody who's like, man, I don't want to use herbicide. What I don't like about crimpers, and a lot of things kind of go this way, right? Is people get told or sold on, I don't even know, $8,000 or $10,000 crimper. Again, a very, very neat, cool tool. But for average food plotter, you're going to go spend that money. And my tests show you're probably going to get around 60, maybe 80% on the high end termination on multi-species cover crop, which is what most hunters are doing. You know, most hunters are not just doing a monoculture. There's USDA studies out there that actually showed flail mowers at the highest from a physical termination on species cover crops. I think they're, again, this is a controlled study. So you're on flat ground, you know, most areas, at least, you know, where I'm at, like a whole field isn't flat. So you have different touch points of that crimper that's going to reduce its effectiveness. There's all these different things that you might not think about when you're just seeing a cool commercial or YouTube video. Like, damn, that looks awesome. Guy's on a tractor. He's listening to, you know, George Strait radio and he's crimping his field. Like, that seems awesome.
We're in a couple
It seems awesome.
See, now you swung me. I want to go do it.
Yeah, now I want to smoke a cigar and go crimping.
But all of that to say, like, in my experience, you just have to be real, like with anything in life. You have to just be realistic with what you're going to get out of it. So I think you're going to get between 60 and 80% termination on multi-species cover crops. And if you're okay with that and you reduce your herbicide, go for it, you know. But if you're okay with using herbicide, or you're okay with even, like I've said, just use a bush hog, you know, and guys are like, oh, we're going to get a bunch of windrows. Like, I haven't seen that phenomenon. I really haven't. I just, if I have an area that has a bunch of windrows, I hit it from the other direction. Sure. And just blow it, you know, I mean, you could just spread it out a little bit. Or if you have a flail mower, which I think that's always a cool idea because you can use it in multiple areas around your farm.
What was a flail?
It looks like a tiller.
Yeah.
It looks like a tiller, but it's got these like hammer blades on it, so it doesn't till up the dirt. Yeah. But it just turns really fast and it just chops up the residue really fine. And then because it's built like a tiller, it actually gives you an even residue spread out like the back versus like
it's kind of like a mulcher behind on a tractor or whatever. And so it just, you see them on the side of the highway whenever they're rolling, and it's got like a little roller. That's a flail mower.
Gotcha. So that's why those are neat, because you can use them around fence lines, like ponds, things like that. Whereas like a crimper is pretty specialized tool. Like once you're done,
and like to your point, it's like $8,000 for like a cool looking crimper.
Well, so not to go off the crimper thing, but it's crimper related, because I was just on the phone with a client yesterday talking about the buckwheat rotation. So my question is, your nitro boost, broadcasting into that, have you seen where it's a monoculture of the buckwheat, where they're suggesting to plant directly into that? His problem that he keeps running into with the monoculture of buckwheat and trying to plant into that in the fall is it's such a tangled 6 foot, 12 foot high mess that he's trying to plant through. And he's like, I have to hold the spreader above my head because I can't even get the seed out. And so I'm just curious on your, like the nitro boost, what does that look like because I haven't used your product.
How do you spread seed through it?
So how do you spread seed through it based on like what you're telling me of how the density of these plants and all that kind of stuff? You're broadcasting through that correctly? And are you doing that with like a hand spreader, or are you doing that on the tractor? What's that looking like for you?
Yeah, so all the above. So in the areas where we're broadcasting through, I mean, you're walking through and spreading it as high as you can and going back and forth and back. And one of the things I will say about that's critical, whether you're using my seed or anybody's, is let's say you have an acre, put a half acre of seed into your spreader, right? And cover that entire acre. So whether you have to hold it high, hold it low, maybe you have one of the, like I got one of those that you put on your leaf blower spreaders. I don't know if you guys have seen those extreme blower products. I mean, that's a fantastic product. But if you make sure you cut the acre cover with a half acre, and then take that a half acre and go to the other side of your field and start over there and do it again, you'll get nice, even coverage. And then in the case of the buckwheat, go ahead, or if it's our Nitro Boost, you're going to have some good, then go ahead and roll it. And anything that's stuck on leaves or stalks or anything, it's going to get shaken off when you roll it and crush it. And then, your seed will be ready to go. So there's not really a good, unless you want to start using a drone to seed into those areas. If all you have is a walking.
I was going to bring
Oh yeah, we might be seeing some stuff with some drones.
Yeah. And hey, I got some pipelines that I would love for some people to seed with a drone, because it's just, it's a lot of straight uphill, basically, if you're using a broadcast or blower spreader. But that would be my recommendation. Is there's really no other way around it. We've done it with an ATV spreader, and you're just driving through it, But again, the same idea is you got to start with less, get total coverage, and then go over it again. That'll help.
So that Nitro Boost is probably chest high when a guy's going to do fall planting. Or high.
Yeah, it should be.
High. Yeah,
it should be. Yeah, depending on deer density and things, it should be, I would say, at least chest high, and in some cases significantly higher.
Have you ever just driven through that and like partially kind of knocked it down to make it easier to walk through to seed it, or no?
Oh yeah, we've done that before. Not really with that intention,
sure.
But like sometimes we're like, hey, we're just going to burn this field off, and one guy who's helping me, well, maybe he's got the spray rig and he's out ahead of where I'm able to get to. I'm on a different field.
Sure.
So he gets everything sprayed, and then you're like, oh, wow, there's like walking
paths. Yeah.
And then you kind of can go through there and then go through and knock it down again, or just kind of let it naturally fall down if it's sprayed, because it will, desiccate and die relatively quickly.
The biggest thing that I saw this year, I didn't really per se do a full like no-till situation, but the moisture that is held in the soil when there is a thatch laying on top of it, I was like mind blown. This year was like, we had a pretty dry spell where it was like make or break on some plots, and I'm pretty sure that thatch on top of that was what saved my plot this year. And it thrived in a no rain situation.
Albert's like it didn't. He goes, he didn't thrive because you didn't do a soil sample, so there's no way it was thriving, bro. It's like it looked good and your deer ate it, but it didn't thrive.
So the deer ate it, so I win.
Your definition of thriving is not Albert's definition of thriving.
100%.
No, I mean honestly though, like there's no argument from me there. I mean it's proven. You're gonna hold on to more moisture when you have that thatch. It's essentially like a sponge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool.
So let's get out of the food plot circle here. And this could be a very dumb question, but I'm going to say it anyways. Soil health inside of your timber. Is there a way to benefit? Let's say you got a clear cut. Like for instance, I have a little clear cut in a section of property that I hunt. Is there a way to improve that soil beyond just what's organically already going to happen from the breakdown of the tops falling down in there and everything?
So,
and you can just tell me to cut this section out because
he said I don't believe so. I'm sorry. I want to hear this.
I mean, so you have to, like in no-till systems, you'll also see this from a microbiology perspective, is what ends up happening when the system's first converted. And this is the same to all the way to forest, as you start more bacterial heavy. And as it goes through the cycles and think of a young forest, it's growing and it creates all these mycorrhizal fungi connections. And massive mycorrhizal fungi networks underneath, young oaks and all of these different things, which are helping to solubilize things like phosphorus and all of this stuff in the soil, and creating what's called glomalin, which is like it's biotic glue essentially, but soil aggregation. So helping that soil to become more porous and more roots for worms and all of these different things to move through the soil, water. That pretty much naturally happens. And forests are really good at doing that. So going out there and like, oh, I need to throw triple 13 down, or I need to throw something, down to help this. I don't think so. I think really just sound, it's probably more important just to practice, sound forest stand improvement or forest practices, so that if you're going in to cut an area, be it a clear cut or be it a select cut, that you're doing it efficiently and you're moving the best quality timber or leaving the best quality depending on your forester's goals, and reducing things like compaction, so you're not going in there every 3 years because you didn't do it right or something like that, right? With big skidders. So maybe somebody will chime in and say, oh, there's a bunch of research, this helps. But in my experience, it's more about the forest stand density is what's going to really impact those trees maximizing their photosynthetic capture because they're healthy and they have big crowns and the density is not there. And then that all results to what's root exudation, which is what comes out of the roots, and all the microbiology below hand. And they do a really good job of balancing that out themselves. So probably not the most concrete answer, but just kind of off the cuff, that would be my reaction to that question.
I like it. Real quick, because before we even started recording, or you and I were talking about the differences from deer hunting cultures and all that kind of stuff. And we've been on a lot of, we've had a lot of guests on as of lately talking about, the overall herd health. And so as we're looking at deer hunting regulations, herd health, and managing your population of deer and deer densities and stuff like that, can you just tie together, we were talking about baiting and Ohio and where you're at and all that kind of stuff. And can you just kind of tie that together and kind of put a bow on it, on what you think and what your perspective is on regulations, managing your food, doing all that kind of stuff? I know that's a big question and a big ask, but yeah, if you get where I'm coming from.
Well, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I can speak from my own experience, so to put it into perspective, we got about 400 acres, primarily timber, southeastern Ohio, not an area that was decimated by EHD. So again, I want to put that into parentheses. I do think we lost some bucks, but we run a pile of cameras. We do just in our annual food plots, I think we're up to 28 to 30 acres a year. And then we got a bunch of clover and stuff like that. So, I would say there's a reason for deer to be there, right? So let's just put that into perspective. We do a ton of timber work. I don't know what I'm up to, 60 some acres of equip programs that I've done timber cutting myself or with the help of a buddy or two. So, we're not just focused on food plots. I've done some clear cuts where I've sold some timber, and I actually did my own. So all of that to say, I think that the average hunter, and this is where I don't want to be like a fanboy for these ODNRs, but I do think they have a very difficult job at a state level, be it Ohio, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan. I think it's a difficult job, and I think it is because I don't believe most hunters, they only use one metric to determine the deer density, right? Hunting observations. Maybe now with cameras being so popular, maybe they use some camera data, but I'm talking the average guy who goes out. And in my experience, and really locked it in this year, is that I would say in most places, we have a lot more deer than we realize. And then just going out and hunting, there's a lot of stuff that can change the success of a hunt. And sometimes it's wind direction. Sometimes it's that a coyote pushed those deer off 20 minutes before you got in there. And you have no idea in the world that happened, or a bobcat or whatever it might be. And then there's other nights where you get in the stand, you're like, this is the best damn night I've ever had. There's deer coming everywhere. And it's like, well, they didn't vanish, right? The neighbors didn't shoot them all, despite what our gut tells us. I think we all feel like, oh, the neighbors must have got them. So when it comes down to it, I think that's probably the biggest hurdle, is truly understanding density. And I'd be happy to talk through kind of some of the things that I do to try to, look at density and manage the property. I'm not sure if you wanted me to get into that or not, but I think that's the biggest thing that I see is, and especially with running Vitalize, I talk to so many people and they're like, I don't have that many deer. And then they put an exclusion fence up, and I'm like, and they will call me back and they're like, holy smokes. They're like, I never would have believed, because I don't get that many pictures of deer. And it's like, well, cameras are not 100%. So keep that in mind,
Well, let's get into that, because you actually did your own little study, we'll call it, and you compared cameras, and I'm assuming you collected your density. You tried to get a density analysis of your property with cameras, and then you hired a drone to come in and do it. How did that go for you?
Well, yeah, it was earth shattering. So I've always tried to look at it multifaceted. So we have a good relationship with neighbors. We talk to them. Great people. I think, not everybody, but a decent amount. I added it up one time, maybe 2,000 acres of neighbors, that I know. And we talk to them, hey, how was your season? Blah, blah, blah. Kind of high level, not like a co-op level. I wish it was a little bit more in depth. But I always do that. Then I'd run camera data. Then I'd look at exclusion fences. And then I'd look at native browse. So I'd go through those areas where I did a 20-acre coal tree removal. And I'd look like, okay, well, the forester said, beech is in southeastern Ohio, foothills of Appalachia. It's a low browse species, right? Like in some of the northern climates, you will see browse heavily. Well, I got beech stump sprouts that are hammered. Look like a bonsai plant. Absolutely hammered. I walked down, a bitternut hickory. Again, not typically a species that deer are going to browse like crazy. I got it browsed. So I'm adding these checks up, and then of course, lastly, hunting observation. You got a couple guys hunting who saw what, and then looking at the cameras at the same time throughout the season, like, oh, we didn't have anybody over here, but there was 3 deer here or whatnot. So I've been doing that for years, but this year I wanted to step it up a little bit. So what I did is I ran a camera survey. Ohio, you're a bait state. I had cameras over primarily bait. There was a couple that were just on big fields. And I ran it for 17 nights leading up to the drone. I ran it from
how many cameras?
Good. I think it was conservatively, let's say 10 or 12, something like that. Okay. It might have been a couple more. Because a couple have died since then. I'm trying to remember when those ones died.
I feel like there's always two more cameras out in the woods than you actually remember putting out there. At least for me.
I say like 10 and 20 like cameras out. And I ran it for 17 nights, and I ran it from 4 to 6. And what I did do is, like, if there was a camera on one field that's only 300 yards from another field, and I got the deer here, and then I got them here 15 minutes later, on field B, unless I knew for sure, like it's a buck, and the other ones were 3 does. If I then got 3 does over here, I'd assume those were the same. And I would just notate, okay, tonight I saw 5 does across all the cameras between 4 and 6. And then, this night I saw 10 or whatever. So after doing that for 17 nights, I think the lowest night was around 8 deer seen. The highest was, I think, 19. And then the average came out to be like 14 and a half does. And I think it was, 2 or 3 bucks, right? Something along those lines. And I say does, it was antlerless. Couple could have been button bucks. I have, of course, made the assumption that the cameras aren't catching all the deer. So then I said, okay, well, let's just roughly, I of course, was being, nerding out and running all these different numbers. But basically, let's just say I doubled it. I said, if I'm catching 14 does for easy math, let's assume there's 28 antlerless deer on the farm, somewhere in thickets and draws, just outside the camera range, right? That type of thing.
In between triggers, yeah.
And then, of course, I said, and then let's assume, the bucks were double as well. So I think the average number of bucks, let's say it was 5. I said, there's 10 or 12 bucks or something like that.
Pretty good.
And
I don't have 10 bucks on my property.
When I did the drone, we ended up finding, I didn't do anything other than look at the data. So the nice gentleman who did it for me, really great guy, he did the survey. He found 71 antlerless deer.
Whoa.
And I think it was 14 or 15 unique bucks.
Specifically on your 300 acres, correct?
On 400 acres.
400 acres.
So that comes out if you do the math on it. Now, again, there's, any biologist would speak to this like, well, don't do this because it gets a little bit tricky if you start going into like, well, square mile basis, because you're probably holding some deer based on your habitat that some of these other areas are not going to have the same relative density.
Yeah.
But in general, if you do want to go down that rabbit hole, because there could be an argument, it could be said that we didn't fly like when it was super cold. It was just based on schedules. So we probably missed a couple, just your thermal difference. It was like 45 degrees out. So I think we caught most of them, but I would assume we've missed a couple. And we also flew it in the morning. So it's not like there were some deer getting up, but a lot of them were still laying down. So if they were right off the property, we didn't count those deer. I mean, we could, he said, oh, there's a real big thicket across from our farm. It's like 300 acres that was clear cut to the bone. I mean, like to the dirt 5 to 7 years ago. And he's like, I could see when I was going, like just a bunch of red, but like, I'm not going to fly over somebody else's property. But so assuming that it's even close to similar, you come up to like 120 to 130 deer per square mile, something along those lines at that given density, if you extrapolate that out. And that's significant. I mean, you'd have to shoot 30 to 50% of those does every year to keep your doe numbers even.
Yeah, as I say, I think 30% is just to keep the herd at continue the herd balance at what it's at per year, harvesting 30% of your does each year. Yeah, that's a lot.
Right, and even so somebody's going to say, oh, well, some of those are button bucks, right? Which, of course they are. But even if you assume that, even if you assume 50% of the 71 antlerless deer were button bucks, and you run the numbers, it's still a lot of deer, and it's still a huge difference between the camera survey.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's cool that you brought that up because, when obviously part of our business is drone thermal surveys, and a lot of people ask like when to do it, how to do it, when's the best time to get this done to be most accurate. And truly, to your point earlier, is realistically, if you actually want this data and want to make it relatable to your property and to make use of it, honestly, like a three survey minimum should be probably a way more accurate result, just because, to your point earlier, coyote could have ran through your property earlier that day. And if you would have happened to get half the number of deer that day, and then the next day they all run back on your property, and your numbers would have been skewed. So when it comes to an actual flight, and if you're using that to manage your herd, we recommend like a 3-flight survey kind of spread out over time that allows different conditions, different weather conditions. I mean, a simple wind direction can dictate how many deer are using your property that day. But I think it's to your point though, like the difference between the drone survey and the camera survey, I saw when you posted that, it was quite eye-opening.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's the best tool from a wildlife management perspective. I mean, I'm not just saying it because that's what you all do. I mean, I truly believe it is the best tool that the layperson, I mean, there's, Ohio had just bought a thermal camera that goes on an airplane or a helicopter, but like for the average person to be able to have that intel, not saying to do it in the middle of the season to go kill a buck. I'm talking from a deer density and management perspective.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. Southeastern Ohio, rolling hills, it is so easy to sit in a stand and go, you don't see for miles, right? You see 30 yards, 50 yards. Even on our biggest fields, you might see 200 yards. That's like an unusual thing in Southeastern Ohio. It's big timber. Well, it's easy to see 4 or 5 does come out of a thicket, and they eat in the food plot, and then they go off, and then you look at your phone or whatever, and then you look up and you're, those same deer are back. Until you fly that drone and you look and you go, holy smokes, in that doe bedding area or in that thicket area where I know some does are bedding, or normally where they come out of or whatever, it's so interesting to see like, there's a group of 4 or 5 does here, and then there's a slight topography change and a little flat, and there's another 3 or 4 here, and then another 60, 70, 80 yards, there's another 6 or 7. All of a sudden you got 20 does in a 30-acre pocket. And observationally, you're never going to unless they all happen to come out at once, which maybe happens like once a year, right? We'll have like a weird anomaly where like all the deer come into a field at one time. And we're always like, holy shit, that was neat, you know? But like normally that doesn't happen. And then your cameras certainly aren't going to pick that up because, 3 or 4 are going to come by and it's going to snap a picture. And even if it's on short interval, you're not going to get, I don't care if you have a feeder or food plot, whatever, you're not going to get all 20 of those deer standing there.
Yeah. And let's not even talk about the deer that, which I personally think just straight up avoid cameras. Like, I mean, the deer that I hunted this year or last year specifically was like very anti-camera, did not like his photo taken, and he purposely avoided cameras on all levels. So like plenty of deer in this landscape that do that too. So like, I love that. I love you're able to experience that and actually see that on like a grand scheme.
Well, I think to your point, Albert, again, not trying to promote thermal surveys and being that
promote it.
I am promoting it, but like it's almost like as a state that has problems with their deer herd and deer hunting and regulations and trying to figure this out. I'm going to just say it. It's criminal for the state of Michigan to not allow people to do these surveys outside of season. Because like, if we're trying to help and help our resource to be the best it can possibly be, it's criminal to say you can't do this, in my opinion. Like we're trying to improve and help the overall herd of the entire state.
Think about when you go to hunt camp and you have the gentleman sitting next to you that says, why would you shoot a doe? I only saw 4 of them this week. And then you have the guy literally hunting the same property is like, I see like 20 each sit. Like it's literally, in my opinion, it's the only way to clear the area of like, okay, let's actually
we have 117 does on this 80 and there's $3.
Yeah.
Like we need to do something, and like that's our 2 cents
well,
on it.
Well, the thing is too, is we shot 6 does this year. So that was post us shooting deer, and we still came up with that number too.
Sure.
And again, I think there's a lot of really detailed people in the hunting industry. I don't think I'm overly unique, but I certainly think I'm probably more focused on detail than like the average Ohio hunter.
Albert, what was your first clue? No offense, bro, but you're extremely detailed, bro. You are very detailed.
But I mean, and I was caught when I got that. I called the guy because I thought there was an error in the report.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, there's no way you like, and I'm not out on my hands and knees with my son showing him, hey, look at how they're eating this maple. And you see how it grew 3 foot and then they came back and hit it again. Or, and I'm looking at tree species that they shouldn't be browsing and photographing it. And I'm thinking, I know there's a lot of daggum deer here, but let's do it with these trail cameras. This is cool, right? Like, and I mean, I was blown away. Again, I'm not just trying to but I think it's the best tool from a management perspective that we could have. I actually, because I'm a nerd, I took the math and ran it on if Ohio hired drone operators, how long it would take to do it by township. We have 88 counties in the state, and each county is made up of like 36 townships. And I ran it. I'm like, okay, it's probably going to take like 2 years. It'll probably take, I think it was like $2.2 million to hire individual drone operators. Now, some of those areas would not be covered, like, obviously Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Toledo. You don't need to be flying over skyscrapers.
Yeah.
But like just in general, so that number would probably come down. And then you look at the total cost of license sales, and it's like if they increase the license by $5, said, hey, this $5 fee is going to go towards drone operators covering the next 2 years. So we have a true deer density based on township
specific
that then could be, and then you can buy tags, because let's say Lee's like, hey, shooting does, but he's got 500 acres next to me, and I'm over here like, well, I planted 28 acres of food plots and 2 foot is missing on every field, and we're shooting does, and it still feels like we can't get out ahead of it, and I only get 3 tags in my county, and one, we're a $1 state, so if I kill a buck, I can shoot 2 does. And it's like, well, I'll just invite some of your buddies. But it's not just because you have a lot of deer. I think this is another big misconception, that it's easy, that no matter what, like, oh, you got a lot of deer, you should just be able to shoot them from the porch. They're survivors, right? It's
and doe hunting is not easy.
Doe hunting is doe hunting, dude. It's work. It turns into work every year for me.
I mean, we had so many missed opportunities this year just because of a shift in wind with big dose. You know, my cousin's at full draw, and he's like, dude, one more step, and she just turned, or it got just too dark. You know, whatever. The stuff that happened when you're hunting.
Yeah.
But I think I optimistically hope that ODNR, Michigan DNR, and others use this technology again, like you said, outside of season. I mean, I'm okay with it for tracking too. I've had got to experience that, not directly for myself, but it's. I would have recovered a deer if we could have flown a drone. You know what I mean? We didn't even talk about that. But phenomenal tool.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says. I mean, I've had it experienced 2 or 3 times. Again, not for myself, but I was there with a good friend of mine, and you know, recovering the deer was amazing. You know, it was flawless. It was just really neat. Yeah. So I think it's great for that. But from a deer study perspective and what it can tell us, just from the density perspective alone, I feel like nobody's talking about that.
100%.
I get so
that's one of the things that we would love to do is if the state of Michigan would contract with us, and then we could manage it, and they would get all the streamlined data and not
per county,
and not have to like work with a million different pilots and all that kind of stuff and have skewed data because this guy has it like this. We could be consistent, and you know, potentially with your help to make a system because of your ability to just, you know, you use mathematics and science in the way that your brain works, because I can barely turn on a light or a computer or anything. But seriously though, like with that assistance and to pull that together, it would be amazing information that they could gather to really make. And the argument that if you break our state into DMUs and really try to manage them independently, it's going to require so much more personnel. It's like, well, no, that argument to me kind of collapses around this. If we come from it at a real good data standpoint, and then we can distribute tags very specific to all those different units and all that kind of stuff, the management then comes with another flight execution to really know what we did and to really get this down to saying like, we have real data here versus, well, did Billy check in his buck this year and did he not, and all that kind of stuff. So that's a whole nother topic unto itself, but
it's a good one though. And I agree. I think that we're at a turning point in pretty much all states where people want more data. I mean, the younger generation wants, why am I allowed or why am I not allowed to shoot X number of deer?
Yeah.
You know, and I think Ohio's a great state. I mean, but why wouldn't you want to make everything better? Like, you know, I mean, that's what our whole society is kind of built on, is always progressing and always making things better, you know? And I think for us, it's like being able to we used to have zones like from Route 70, which cuts Ohio in half, clear down to Cincinnati, was Zone C. You got 6 tags. One can be a buck. So a guy at 5 acres, he can shoot 6 does, you know? Well, people didn't like that because, of course, you know, you had pockets of super high deer density and pockets of super low deer density. So then they got rid of that. And they went to by the county. But now I think people are pushing like, well, you know, some counties just got hit super hard by EHD, and other parts of the same, Meigs County is a good example. Other parts they're so loaded with deer and they could only get, you know, 1 tag this year. And they're like, you know, all of our work managing deer for the last 5-6 years is out the window. Because we didn't get hit hard with EHD, and now we're just going to have this huge influx of deer because of the tag system change. And I think ODNR was put in a tough spot. EHD breakout like nobody's ever seen. But again, we have these tools now. Why not start them on a test program? Take 1 county in each state, break it up by township, and say, hey, here's the data we're finding. You know, this township on average, you know, you can have a high, you can have a low, you can, you know, then run the average of deer density per square mile and present that data, and then do it for 2 years and see if it's working. And if it is, and you're seeing like, oh yeah, we've seen increased doe harvest or decrease depending on what the data shows, then why not implement it on a whole region and then eventually a whole state? You know, that would be like, to me, that's like very pragmatic. But and I don't think the funding, maybe I'm again, being blindly optimistic, I would pay twice as much for a license if I knew it was going to that type of data that's going to help me on my farm.
I think the funding at that level is just, it's really not even a thing because like you said, if it's 2 million or whatever that number really is to actually do that for the entire state, when you look at the whole of the resource of needing to manage it and what needs to go into it to bring something back versus, just trying and flinging things at the wall that don't seemingly work and trying, there's no control. There's none, and that's what we unfortunately keep seeing in our state is that we just keep extending seasons. Like that's going to fix everything because they want more deer shot. And it's like, unfortunately that's not working and there's no, yeah.
Go ahead. I was from a guy from Ohio. I really want your, for one, it's a 2-part question. For one, because one of the things that Michigan is, people are advocating for is a $1 rule. So I want to know from your side of things, being in Ohio, a $1 state. For one, do you think Ohio would be as good as it is if they allowed people to have 2 buck tags, and or what is your mindset when like being in a $1 state? Like truly, what is your mindset when you go into the season? Are you like after you harvest your deer, are you like, man, I'm done. This sucks. Like I want to keep hunting. Like I wish I had more tags because I could kill more bucks. Or do you think if Ohio went to 2 buck tags, would your resource just get like depleted?
Really, I mean, I've thought about this a lot because I follow some really smart people from the state of Michigan, and it seems like the data doesn't really support that there would be a huge difference from a buck change. But for me, I just can't get over the idea that I would not be as selective if I knew I had another tag. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how you quantify that. Mm-hmm. People say, well, like only 6% of guys fill both tags.
Right.
I just don't know specifically on public lands in say the state of Michigan or state of Ohio. You're on a public land, Wayne National Forest, Salt Fork, Shawnee State Forest. I mean, you're talking rugged terrain. You went and hiked up,
big sections.
Sleeping in the back of your truck. All of a sudden, and then you see a 120-inch 8-point buck. Like, what guy wouldn't blast that if you knew you had another buck tag in your pocket? I just can't get past that. So for me personally, I think Ohio would have a tremendous negative impact. And I think we would see even additional high grading than we already do because of things like baiting and stuff like that if we had 2 buck tags. As far as how do I feel, I think I've killed 4 out of 6 years. I've shot my buck on opening or second day of season.
Wow.
So
you're done hunting at the beginning of the year.
A real short season.
You have a real short season.
And you're still happy. You're still happy as a hunter?
Yeah. I mean, because to me, I know I have a young family. I don't always there are times where I'm like, oh man, I wish I could target a specific buck. But the buck I killed this past season was a 4.5-year-old. And I'm like, I passed him at 20 yards. He came back behind me opening day, made a scrape. I shot him at 8 yards. Like, it was just a cool memory, full draw, shot him at 8 yards. Ran 40 yards and fell over 60 yards, something like that. The year before, I shot a deer I had a bunch of history with. He was 7.5 years old. I sent the teeth in. I called him Dozer. He had 15 scoreable points. Just a beast of a deer, scarred up all over. And then watched him since 2020 or 21. I had pictures of that deer. When I first started getting him, he was 4 years old, I guess. So I'm not going to pass those. But yeah, I'm happy. Like this year I took out my cousin. He's killed a few deer, but I had a brand new 400 Legend. I had a brand new Bog Death Grip. I set it up on this blind over a food plot. I'm like, all right, cousin Dutch, you're coming with me, man. We're going to the north end of the farm. And we hunted, and I'm like, we got to get some does killed, and we had a blast. We had some does come from one way. We almost got it done on them. They kind of busted us. It's like sitting there sulking, and all of a sudden here they come, and I go get on the gun. I crank the hammer back. I open the window and she looks and turns broadside. I'm like, Hitler now, he shoots her and makes a perfect shot, So to me, you just find other things.
I was gonna say, was he a new hunter, like newer hunter?
He's killed a few deer. But he's only killed, I think that was like his fourth deer.
Well, the only reason I ask is because
hunter.
the only reason I ask is because that's one aspect of a 1 buck rule implement in Michigan that I didn't even think about is like people who are like, I love to go hunting. When you fill your bug tag, you're gonna find another reason to go hunting, and that reason bringing somebody else into the outdoors
will bring more new hunters.
Will bring new hunters.
That's my argument, hands down, is that you look at how many guys, they have a 160 acre piece of property, and they have their family that's hunting it. So let's say in Michigan they have 3 main guys that are hunting it. They now have 6 buck tags that they could possibly fill, and so when they each shoot a buck that year, and now they have 3 more that they could possibly fill. Out of our selfish nature, you don't bring somebody else in to shoot those other bucks. And so when you're done, you do bring somebody else in. And now if this fighting for a hunting ground just became a lot, you're not fighting nearly as much. And so like you're bringing other people in. There's a whole bunch of aspects to this thing that I think that, yes, I 100% agree with Albert. Like the statistical data of 6% of the second bucks don't get shot. But the mental aspect of this whole thing, of somebody not shooting that buck because their season's over versus letting it go and they don't want to end it right away, or they want to see if there's another one around the corner or whatever, is going to have a big impact. And again, Albert's a way smarter guy than I am, but to quantify that is virtually impossible. That's why I give us 3 years to see if it actually works. And your doe harvest numbers, I don't know. I have just an unbelievably hard time believing that they're not going to skyrocket of harvested does in the state of Michigan. If it was 1 buck, just because the guy's going to be like, there's a doe right there. I already got a doe tag in my pocket with a combo. Boom, shoots that. Now he's got meat in the freezer. I can skin it so many ways that, I mean, it's just, I'd like to see it.
Yeah.
That's another thing too, is I think it's, like the monkey's kind of off your back. So I think 2 things happen in Ohio. Guys who still want to hunt, they're like, well, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I still get pumped shooting a doe.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's, my heart races. I mean, I get equally as excited. So I think that's one thing you do focus on, like, all right, I'm going to go do, hunt for does or whatnot. I think the other thing is, just because there's not as many tags, you do see people say, I'm going to pass this buck, and there's a decent chance he's going to make it. I know the neighbors are kind of
never been said in Michigan. That has never been said in Michigan.
Like you think about it, you're like, oh, let's say your neighbor's brown it's down. He's like, I don't care, you can't eat horns, whatever, which is fine. But like in Ohio, if you have that and they shoot the first 1 or 2 year old buck that goes by them,
they're done.
That means all those 3, 4, 5, 6 year old bucks have a really good chance of it, because that guy's done. Now, if he can do that twice, and maybe he's in that 6%, but that could really drastically impact that particular neighbor's hunting, right?
Absolutely.
And he brings in buddies or whatnot. So for me, I think that's a big piece. The other thing you have in Ohio, which I think this goes both ways, and certainly people are upset about this in Ohio, and I see both sides of the argument, but you have a guy who goes and kills a buck, and there's a ton of amazing hunters in this state, and they'll kill a giant 160-inch deer. And immediately their thought is, how do I make all these deer survive for next year? So it immediately goes into a defensive baiting and keeping no pressure. They might have 3, 4, 5, 800 acres. Some of these guys who I know and I'm friends with, and they're great deer hunters. But I mean, they might have an 800-acre lease or property that they own. Most of the time, if it's that much ground, it's leased. But like, they'll go in and be like, I'm going to dump 1,000 pounds of corn a week, and that's the only pressure that farm's going to see. And I'm going to run cell cameras, and I'm going to make sure there's no trespass. You go through all these things, but that again, get a lot of deer who they figure it out pretty quick. Like, I'm going to stay by that corn pile. I'm going to stay in the low pressure area of this square mile, and they survive. And I think that's another thing that's not talked about all that often, but there's a lot of guys, and I mean a lot of guys, and I'm we can bait in Ohio. I'm no different. That if I'm like, okay, we got a gun season coming up, guys are filling up corn feeders and they only got one buck tag or their buck tag's filled and they're trying to get deer to survive. It's a much different mindset, I think. And I can't speak for everybody, but it's not like, oh, I want to get my buck tag. It's like, I want to get next year's buck tag ready. Mm-hmm. It's a shift. And again, I'm not talking for everybody, but just in my circle, and I talked to quite a few different guys and landowners and stuff, that seems to be the big cultural difference. And I don't know if that's right either. I mean, I think that has its negative impacts on, the guy who only can afford a smaller piece of property or has a permission spot and it's 5 acres and now
or can't dump 1,000 pounds of corn out each week.
Yeah.
Right. And he's working 6 days a week and he gets 1 day a week to hunt and he drives 2 hours one way to get a few hours in a tree stand. And, the neighborhood, I get that there's downsides to that experience or potentially downsides to somebody else's experience too. So I think we do have to weigh that, the relationship there. But like I said, I think every state, just like in anything, can always look to get better. And I think the more data we have will be beneficial to make those decisions. Like with the drone surveys that you all do or want to do in the state of Michigan, it's like if you fly a square mile and you go, well, there's only $25 in the square mile and there's roughly 48 hunters with 2 tags. You could do the math pretty quick on that and go, wait a second. Are we expecting to kill, if everybody's successful, how are these guys even going to squeeze through here? Well, buck, redistribution, you can get into some of those different arguments, but it's, I think the more data we have and can break down will be really beneficial for the next 10 and 20 years in the whitetail world.
Amen. I like it. Cool. Well, it was awesome hanging out with you. We really appreciate your time, Albert. And I don't know if there's any closing remarks that we wanted to touch on or anything like that.
I have 1,000 more questions I would ask you, specifically around soils and food plots and stuff. But obviously, we want to be respectful of your time and everybody who is lasted this long to our podcast. So I appreciate everybody listening. We appreciate you, Al. Give a quick, if anybody wants to know more about Vitalize, well, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, just vitalizeseed.com, Instagram, Vitalize Seed, TikTok, Vitalize Seed, Facebook, Vitalize Seed, YouTube, Vitalize Seed. They can check us out there and reach out. I always tell people, call, text, email. We got a chat function on the website. You can write into that. It comes right to our phones. We can answer chats that way. We just added a rewards program. We're really excited about that. So it's free to sign up. You buy stuff, you get points, just like you do if you fly on a United Airlines flight, you get points. Same idea. You get points and can go towards the next purchase or whatnot. We just added that and it's free. It's just our way to give back to those who support us and have from the beginning. So, hey, I really appreciate you guys having me on. This was a lot of fun and I could probably talk for 4 or 5 more hours, but I'm going to end
it with one question for you, and I just want this as short as answer as possible. Do you believe that better soil health creates bigger antlers?
Not by itself. I don't think you can take one singleized variable.
Actually, not the response I was planning on.
Well, yeah, he's a genius. Yeah. He's not gonna.
Well, you look at the hunting food plot marketing industry, and it is literally like plant this food and you have bigger antlers. Yeah. So that's why I wanted to.
Yeah, we've intentionally. I just want to be very clear about this. Is we've intentionally stayed away from that.
Yeah.
We work with row crop farmers. We work with cattle farmers. We work with flower farmers. That I just did a big virtual conference for a couple of days where we're working with them about how can we grow the best, dahlias or whatnot. And it's a big industry. Cut your own, pick your own. I love whitetail deer, but I never want somebody to feel like, oh man, he sold me some snake oil. Like when we're talking to people, we want to be upfront and as transparent as possible. And to grow big antlers, go read Strategic Harvest Systems from MSU Deer Lab or something like that. You got to get age and you do have to maximize nutrition. And I always tell people that really comes down to plant more food, shoot more deer. In a lot of places, it's a mixture of both. And planting that food might be with a chainsaw, but we have to get age on deer. And through that, epigenetic triggers and things that happen over generations of well-fed deer is what ultimately produces big antlers when they get to 4.5, 5.5, 6.5.
That's the answer we were looking for.
What an amazing, and if that doesn't sell you on Vitalize Seed, I don't know what will. So,
I mean, I'm sold. Like, I'm like all in next year. We're going to see what's up, man. So
and you're buying a crimper?
I'm not buying a crimper. I'm probably not
cool.
tilling. I'm gonna geek out and like I know they got a bunch of content on YouTube and all that stuff. So I'm gonna go make sure that. And now that I know you a little bit, Albert, I might hit you up and just really figure this out and go after it. And maybe this farm just becomes a full on Vitalize test. I'm gonna throw in a whole new food plot.
I think we should get a no-till though.
Okay. Maybe we could look into that. But I will say this, I still don't know who did it, but your product ended up at my house this year and I have no clue where it came from. Somebody just like hooked me up with a couple of your bags of seed and I don't know where it came from. So if you're out there and you're listening to this and you dropped off seed into my package box this year, somebody tell me who did that.
It was a sign.
Like I'm not joking.
Awesome.
My Amazon box had Vitalize Seed, and I have no clue where it came from. So still
maybe
looking.
It was Jared. I wonder if it was Jared. I'll have to ask him. But that's awesome. It's really been a pleasure, guys. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you letting me on your platform and just getting to know you both. And you guys have my cell phone. Well, I know Lee does. Please share my cell phone. Reach out, shoot me a text. And if you ever have questions or anything, or just want to share a successful deer hunt, I love chatting with guys, and it's really been my pleasure talking with you both.
Awesome, man.
Love it. Appreciate your time.
God bless you, man. Thank you.
All right, man. You all take care. Bye-bye now.